mentioned, I know we have a lot of folks here attending from Wisconsin. I am a very large Saints fan, but also like the Packers. So glad to be here today virtually. Sorry, it's not in person. I'm really passionate about driving results with my customers and with marketing. And as Laura said, I used to work for an agency, and we were talking before about whether I'd used HubSpot prior to joining HubSpot myself. And I actually didn't. And so when I was starting at HubSpot for the first couple of weeks of training, I was just amazed at the results I could have been getting and how I could have been tying revenue to my customers and our strategies. So I'm a huge HubSpot fan these days, and really am excited to talk to you more about smart content. As Laura mentioned, I am a customer success manager here at HubSpot, so I work directly with our customers. So some of you, if you're HubSpot customers and work directly with HubSpot, you probably have a customer success manager. And everything I'm talking about today is absolutely great content to talk about with your customer success manager if you have one. All right, so a quick agenda is that we're going to be, we're first going to go over the personalized content in your inbound efforts. So we're going to discuss what you need to do before you begin. Smart content, I should highlight, is not something you want to just get excited about and immediately start running everywhere. First, you really want to make sure that your website is tight, that your content is tight, that you're going to hit the right people with it. Then we'll talk about best practices and examples for smart content, the different types, where you can use them. Finally, we're going to talk about how you would benchmark success briefly, so how you're going to measure those results. And we are also going to provide you with next steps and resources, which will be sent out towards the end of the week, as Laura mentioned. All right, so ideally, when you leave this hug, you're going to know how to prepare for using smart content. You're going to know the different types. You're going to know where to place it. You're going to have some ideas for different smart content strategies and maybe how you can use them at your own business. And then finally, you'll actually be given a list of next steps, so that way you can start implementing. All right, so first, again, let's talk about what personalized content is and how it works with your inbound efforts. So contextualized marketing as a whole, which smart content is a part of, is helping your prospects solve their problem. Personalized website experience, I'd also say email experience there too, for each visitor based on their needs, habits, and goals. So you might ask, why is this personalization important? And here's a couple of numbers to illustrate that. First is the average person receives 5,000 ad messages a day or more. 41% of consumers switch businesses due to a lack of personalization, and 74% of marketers struggle to scale their personalization efforts. 78% of CMOs in 2021 believe custom content is the future of marketing, so it's something that's really important to the C-suite. 90% of consumers find custom content useful, and 78% of consumers, so same number there, perceive a relationship between themselves and a brand after seeing custom content. One thing that's interesting is that this is also happening during a greater move for privacy in different ad platforms and across digital. So a marketer's challenge here is really, how do we create these customized experiences that really speak to the right people at the right time with the right content? And a tool that you can lean into is smart content. Okay, so now that we know a little bit more about what contextualized marketing is and why it's important, how do we deliver the right pieces of content to those right people at the right time? That's the question. So let's go over 4 key steps that you should complete before even using smart content. First, and people that are very familiar with HubSpot will probably recognize this, is first off, we need to know who we're selling to. We need to know who we want to engage. So really knowing your buyer persona, which is a semi-fictional representation of the ideal buyer based on data, based on interviews maybe that you've had with your customers and maybe some of your non-customers, as well as some educated guesses. And we're going to take a deeper look into this, but one thing that I'd like to stick in everyone's heads when you're thinking about buyer persona is details. Be as specific as possible. I'm going to show you a very specific example. If you have a dog walking business, which you'll see why it's relevant in a second, why I mentioned that, you don't want to just say people who have dogs. You want to get really, really specific into the psychographic data, the demographic data, really understand who you're trying to speak to and why they would be interested in your business solving their problem. So let's talk about Boston Dogwalkers, which is a completely fictional business that I like to use because who doesn't enjoy looking at pictures of dogs while they're on a webinar? This fictional business is a regional business. They're focused strictly in Boston and the surrounding area. Essentially, the problem that they solve for people is people that need to have their dogs walked. And a question for you for B2B, who is the person buying your products and services at your target business? Focusing on that, who will be purchasing it at your target business will help you make it more human when you're doing that buyer persona and really focusing on the problem that you're going to solve for them. All right, so a buyer persona includes psychographic and demographic data representative of Boston Dogwalkers customers, and it really, really, again, needs to be detailed enough to easily address this person. So we have Busy Brian, who is the buyer persona and the perfect fit, the perfect representation of who would be interested in buying dog walking from Boston Dogwalkers. He's a dog owner, so that's a good start. He's a Boston resident, also good. And then we get into some more specific information. Ideally, 23 to 45 was just based on, again, fictional business. Based on the data, they saw that this was the age range of the people that most enjoyed using their dog walking services. Brian is career-oriented. That's also a psychographic piece that the business could have gotten through surveys or through talking to their customers, where they learned that these are people that are really busy with their day-to-day careers and need some help taking care of their pets at the same time. Some more psychographic is that Brian loves his dog, but he's way too busy to walk him during the day and sometimes the evening due to his long hours and long commute. And the other thing about Busy Brian is that he's financially secure. He's able to spend money on things like dog walking that might be kind of seen as an extra. And one thing about buyer personas that I think gets skipped over by a lot of my customers and a lot of different businesses that is really important to highlight is your anti-persona. So who don't you want to be targeting? Whose problem will you not solve at all? It's really important to know this so that way you don't waste your energy and your resources and clog up your data by trying to nurture these specific people too far through the flywheel. So Summer Sarah is an excellent example of that. She has some commonalities with Busy Brian. She's a dog owner, she's a Boston resident, but there it kind of ends and we can see why she's not a great fit. She's currently on summer break from graduate school, so she might be in Boston, but that's a break. She's going to be going back. She only lives 9 months. She lives out of state 9 months out of the year. She also actually loves walking her dog. So that's not really something that she would outsource, nor is she currently in a position to do that. She's busy in grad school. She has a part-time job. She's not really in a financial position to be spending extra money on services, especially ones that she doesn't need. So I really like to highlight and contrast the two of those because if you were only looking at location and dog owner, you would actually be targeting both these people, but only one person would be a fit for your services. So having that anti-persona is really important and making sure it's detailed as well. All right, so now that we know that who we're targeting with smart content, it's time to establish your flywheel. So mapping the buyer's journey to that flywheel. And when I say flywheel, what you're doing there is using the momentum of your happy customers to drive referrals and repeat sales. So you're not just using the funnel approach where we're going from top of the funnel, bottom of the funnel. We're actually making it a wheel that can go on momentum with rave reviews, creating more customers. You're using your customers as your own advocates. So in the flywheel model, your customers are at the center of all of your decisions and prospective customers as well. And you can use that momentum to drive that engagement. And the key components of the flywheel are attracting. So we want to attract someone like Busy Brian. We want to engage Busy Brian around understanding like not only why he might need dog walking services, but why Boston Dogwalkers would be the best fit for him. And then once he signs up, making sure that we're delighting him. And then ultimately, hopefully Busy Brian is really excited about that. He becomes a repeat customer. He shares about it with his friends and so on. I do want to talk about how to lose Brian in 10 minutes. I might want to say 10 seconds here, but what you don't want to do with Brian and why the flywheel is important is hitting different pieces of the flywheel at the wrong time. For instance, if Brian knows he's overwhelmed and his dog is stressed, but he's not sure what to do about it, delivering him ads 10 times a day on social media with a lot of salesy verbiage is probably not going to work. He's going to get freaked out. He's probably not ready to buy yet. He's kind of just figured out that he has a problem. If he, let's say Brian knows he wants a dog walking service, but isn't sure which one, make sure if you're just giving him content about what shedding is, he's actually a little further in your flywheel. At that point, you should be directing him to something that will encourage him to buy specifically for Boston Dogwalkers or learning more about the brand itself. Another thing that I actually can see often is when maybe Brian's he's ready to buy. He wants to purchase immediately, but he can't find a form on your website to actually buy those services. So it's really important to make sure that we are giving people that are ready to buy the opportunity and an easy way to do that. All right, so after you have that buyer's persona, you understand where your flywheel and what the buyer's journey looks like for Brian. It's time to audit your website. I might hear you groaning about the thought of a website audit, but it's really important because with smart content, you want to make sure all of your foundational content is working and flowing together first before adding that layer on top of it. When you don't audit your content ahead of time, it can create a bit of a dumpster fire, to be quite honest. You want to make sure that smart content is making things simpler and not adding complexity. You want to make sure that it's actually streamlining your processes and streamlining your buyer's journey and not making it more difficult. And when you do audit and make sure that everything is clean and your data is good ahead of time, it'll feel really good and you can see the smart content actually working for you. So you might want to take a screenshot of this. We will also be sending this out later in the week since it is a little bit text heavy, but I wanted to include a little guide of how you audit and exactly what those steps are there. We've also included a link to a HubSpot blog post that talks exactly about how to audit. So first, you need to figure out what exactly you have on your website, then conducting internal reviews, inviting coworkers, trusted advisors to review that site together. Finally, you want to do some usability testing and make sure everything is working well. And as the final thing, I would make a list of like what are your must-haves in updating that website as well as your nice-to-haves. So for that, and again, feel free to screenshot this or refer to that blog post. There's also a ton of content out there, both on HubSpot and on other sites about how to do a website audit. I think the most important thing to note here is you just want to really make sure that your content is where you want it to be before adding a layer of smart content in there. And finally, a question that comes up quite frequently, I know in my conversations with customers, is your database clean? You really want to make sure that your list membership and contact lifecycle stages are up to date before you do this. And before you do smart content, that's going to be including those characteristics. You want to make sure that you, for instance, don't have a smart CTA, a smart call to action, that's going to be targeting a list that's old and has bad emails on it. So making sure that those lists, those contact lifecycle stages, if you're going to be using that characteristic, are up to date and ready to go before utilizing them. All right, so congratulations. You now know the 4 key steps before starting the smart content in the first place of having your buyer persona, knowing your flywheel, knowing the buyer's journey for that buyer, understanding what content that you have currently and cleaning it up if needed, as well as cleaning up your database to make sure that all of your lists and contact lifecycle stages and other pieces are ready to go. So with that, let's actually get into how to create smart content. So first, what is smart content? You can use smart content tools in HubSpot to optimize your content for your visitor's country, the device, the language, list membership, lifecycle stage, referral source. We also have 2 new things that you can use smart content for, which is ad source and query parameters, which I'm really excited for. So this means things like you can have mobile optimized forms, you can have smart CTAs customized to your visitors' list membership, such as prospect or something like that. You can also have rich text on your website that changes between international currencies. So if you have Canadian and American customers, you can change it between Canadian and American dollars so they view the correct amount wherever they're viewing your website. So this is a really powerful tool to give your customers and your prospects and visitors a really unique and personalized experience. And if just to contrast between the two for a little bit, when you have default content, we're talking about really generalized messaging. It's not customized and it's not optimized to speak directly to each of your customer or maybe your main customer in any part of the flywheel. So for instance, if we remember those statistics that we saw in the beginning, 41% of consumers switch businesses to a lack of personalization. And some easy examples of what smart content will do, what this customized content will do, will be able to do things like mobile seeing shorter fields. So it's easier for them to fill out on the go if they're just on their phone and in their car and just really quickly want to submit a form. Someone in Canada sees Canadian dollars. A customer can see a different call to action than a prospect on your homepage. A customer can see share your review, whereas a prospect could see book a demo. So really, really key items to easily create a different personalized experience. Here's some important things to remember about smart content before we move deeper into it. One is that there's 8 criteria now. There used to be 6, now there's 8. We're gonna go over each one in some of the next slides where you can screenshot it, and again, we'll be sending it out later too. The 3 places you can use smart content are on your forms, on your CTAs, and specifically rich text. One thing to caution about doing is smart content inception. You don't want to have smart content inside of smart content inside of smart content. For instance, having the form, like a smart form with a smart CTA with then smart text, like you really want to make sure that it's going to flow well throughout the journey. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. There's only 1 rule per module relating back to that again. So for instance, you can't have on the same form, you can't make it a smart rule for currency based on what country they're connecting from, and list membership. You have to pick one. Another note is just avoiding using smart content in blog posts. It can confuse RSS readers and mess up your SEO. So just note not to do that. And then really remember not to neglect the default view that we just talked about. There should always be a default view for your smart content, which should just be a generalized view to someone unfamiliar with you or your content. I personally kind of think of them as strangers in the attract phase of the flywheel. So that's what we recommend as using as your general, and then using smart content to layer the ones that might be prospects or current customers, et cetera, and layering that on top of it. All right, so time for another screenshot. So some important things. This is similar to the last slide, but has more text on it. So if you want to just take a second and screenshot to remember, I'll leave this up here for 5 seconds so that way you can screenshot it. But again, we will be sending it out later. Taking some time. All right, so let's actually talk about that criteria and characteristics. So first of the 8 is ad source, which is a really exciting new characteristic that we're offering for smart content, where you're able to show content to viewers based on the ad they've clicked. I'm just going to repeat that because I'm sure a lot of the marketers in the audience are going to be excited for that, is that you're going to show content to viewers based on the ad they clicked. The ad source is determined by the UTM parameters in the page URL. So what I want to really highlight here is what this means is that you can make sure that the content is really targeted to people that have seen that specific ad, and make sure they're having a cohesive experience throughout their whole ad journey. So they're not seeing something with completely different formatting. They're seeing something that has, if it's rich text, it has the same language that they just saw in the ad. If it's a form, it looks similar to what they just saw in the ad. If it's a CTA, it's related to what they clicked on the ad for, engaged with the ad on in the first place. And you can, and then we have ones like country, so displaying content to the viewer based on their country, device type, which allows you to target visitors accessing your site via mobile, tablet, or desktop. Again, that one is really important. I know it sounds really simple, but if you've ever tried to fill out a form that had way too many fields and way too much text on your smartphone, I think you'll empathize with how important this one can actually be to make sure we're not neglecting it and using smart content for it. Another thing is the referral source. So show visitors smart content based on how they found your site. So you can customize that, whether someone came in from social, whether they came from Google, where they came from can be customized. Some other ones to know are the preferred language. So you can personalize content based on the language set. And then the final three that I'd really like to highlight are contact list membership. So if you have a list, basically you're able to create smart content directly for people that belong on that list. That could be really powerful for things like book a demo if someone has signed up already for your newsletter and shown interest, etc. Other ones to know, lifecycle stage, so displaying different content based on the visitor's lifecycle stage property value in HubSpot. And then finally, we also now have query parameter. So show content based on the query parameters in the visitor's page URL. So that's a lot. And you can take a screenshot of this if you, just to remember that. You can also find it in all of our HubSpot documentation about smart content, as well as the materials we'll be sending out later this week. I'll give you guys a second, and we're going to look at some more examples of how to use these a little bit later in the deck. But definitely as you're listening and as we're going through these, like, make sure that you're writing down notes of how you might leverage this for your own business, for your own clients. There's a lot of really powerful things in here, and it's very simple to set up within HubSpot. And so where can you use smart content in HubSpot? You can use it in text, you can use it in CTAs, and you can use it in forms. And we're going to talk about each of those. So first, let's talk about text. When you create or edit an email, you can add smart rules to the subject line and the email body. So essentially what that means is that the text and the subject line, or actually the text or the subject line, can be used to target specifically people in one of those 8 ways that we just discussed. So you could have people see different subject lines for different life cycle stages, different countries, different ads that they might have seen. Anyway, very powerful here. You can just see this. I have the example of editing the rich text in there. And so you'll just see on the left-hand side. And there's a link here of how to add the smart content to a page, email, or template. It's a very thorough and easy knowledge base article with steps lined out for you wherever you're adding the smart content. So highly recommend checking out that page to see the actual way the functionality works and playing around with it yourself. For the smart calls to action, you can display customized button to your different visitors based on the data stored in their HubSpot contact record or based on the information known about the criteria we talked about before. On the left-hand side, I have a little screenshot just showing how you can create the smart version. You just go to actions and select create smart version. It's pretty simple, which is great. And one of the things I love about HubSpot is the ease of use. And this is definitely pretty easy to create. I've linked down here, which again, you'll be getting exactly how to do this within HubSpot, and you'll get that how-to article within there. So you could create different calls to action for downloading an ebook if they're still just learning about your brand, or maybe just realizing they have a problem, like they need someone to walk their dog. You could have book a demo, you could have people book a meeting, you can have these various CTAs and place them in different places around HubSpot, so that way people have a more personalized experience. And then finally, forms. You can create a smart form, which allows you to change the entire form depending on your website visitor and their particular viewer characteristics. So I have an example here currently where they've gone to the smart rules. And again, in smart rules on HubSpot is just saying like basically which of these criteria or characteristics you want to target with this. And for us, we've said we want to show a different content based on the country, and then selected the actual country. And we have the knowledge base article. Again, it's a really good one of how to create smart forms linked out here. You'll be getting that later this week. It's also pretty simple just to look up in the knowledge base. Put in smart forms, it should come up for you. I love the knowledge base. So feel free to look into that, and I would recommend playing around with it so you can see kind of the different power that these forms can have to speak to different people in their stage of the buying journey. All right, so now that we kind of understand what smart content is, we know those 8 different characteristics we can target, we know where the 3 different places we can put it, or the 3 different types that we have there. Exactly how do you know where to put those when you're in HubSpot? Where do you put the smart form? Where do you put smart text? Where do you put smart CTA? And how do you kind of strategically decide that? It can vary depending on the business, but I wanted to show you a couple of examples of like where I've seen customers personally use it and where I would use it. Like we've talked about a little bit before, when you create or edit an email, you could add smart rules to the subject line and to the email body. So that right there means you can do something like personalize a newsletter to speak differently to your current customers versus people that might just be in the beginning of their experience with you. Current customers could see text that has announcements of new things to add to their product that they already currently have, whereas maybe someone that hasn't purchased yet could see more top of the funnel or more engaging information about your basic product. So in this example, I've shown like how you could have how it does manage smart rules in the email body. This is just a text block that we've selected to go to manage smart rules on the module, and then shown the different subject line options. Like for instance, we've made the subject line a smart module. So we have the default set. Again, the default should be very general. It can speak to someone that's an absolute stranger to your brand. And for this one, we've talked about the monthly pause, which I think is pretty funny, is the name for the newsletter. But then if people are part of like the people ops HR list, we've selected that they've received something called the monthly pause, announcing new discount for teams, which might drive engagement and drive sales for people in that area to purchase a new product that's designed for different teams. Some other places you could use it. Here's a form on a landing page. This could also be used on your website page. It doesn't have to be a landing page, where you can see how someone would go and create a smart variation to the form, selected the dog walking example, and then edited from there. So someone can see if they haven't purchased before, they could reserve their first walk with you. Or if someone has purchased in the past, they could do another walk. If they're just considering buying a dog and considering that they might need dog walking services for that, if you have a list for it or know they may or have that information, you could customize this form based on that. And then finally, in the Design Manager tool, you can also add smart content to rich text modules. You can do it in the global module as well. So for the designers that are joining us today, there are ways to do that within the Design Manager. All right, so congratulations. You just learned every type of smart content and where you can use it. And we're going to talk a little bit about one important note is do not forget to preview your smart content. before publishing, when you get in there, you're excited about it, you've done all the 4 steps before using smart content, you've decided which of the 8 characteristics you want to use, which of the 3 different types you want to use, you know where you're going to put it, you've gone in, you've updated it, you're ready to go. Do not forget to preview it. The reason for that is that then we actually have functionality in HubSpot where you can select the specific smart rule and be able to view it. So that way you know how it's going to show up for someone that's on mobile, for instance. If you have the different devices for smart content, you can see how it's going to look for people in different countries, etc. Basically, for whatever rule, you want to make sure that you're viewing every version of that to better understand how it will look to a person that's in that stage of your flywheel. All right, so time for best practices and examples of smart content in HubSpot. And then after that, we're going to have time for Q&A. So when we're seeing these examples, I really encourage you to take notes, just think about how you might actually implement this for your own customers and clients, like get the wheels turning there. So that way in the Q&A, that's kind of what we can discuss a lot of that as well if you have specific ways that you're considering using smart content. All right, so one way that I've seen customers use this is having a smart CTA that optimizes to your visitor's lifecycle stage. This one is actually put directly on the homepage of the customer. So that way, whenever someone visits their homepage, let's say bostondogwalking.com, the main website CTA will be optimized so that to where the visitor is on their journey. For instance, if we have busy Brian and he's just starting to have an inkling that he needs someone to walk his dog, when he goes to the website, he's going to see download our dog walking guide. Because he's unknown, they don't have them on a list or anything. He's not maybe in a life cycle. His life cycle is more top of the funnel. So he's going to see that default CTA of download our Boston Dog Walking Guide, so we can engage him with content and help kind of lead him to what the solution to his problem will ultimately be, which hopefully will be walking his dogs with Boston Dog Walking. However, for a different life cycle stage, let's say someone's already a subscriber, they're a lead, they're an MQL, etc., but they haven't converted yet, they're going to see a CTA that says get a demo walk. So that way they can go ahead and get exposed to that and start the conversation with the sales team about signing up for walking with Boston Dog Walking. Finally, for someone in the evangelist or customer lifecycle stage, when they go here, again, to the main website, they're going to see a CTA about sharing their dog walking experience, which brings us back to the flywheel we discussed about making sure that we're giving customers the opportunity to share about their experience and help us have the momentum going of them sharing about it, their friends, family, coworkers seeing it, and keeping the momentum going there. So a really interesting way and smart way, I think. It's a pretty easy thing to do in HubSpot. So definitely recommend maybe getting the wheels turning on how you can personalize your homepage a bit more with smart content. Finally, another example here is optimizing the form to currency. Let's say Boston Dogwalkers has expanded to Toronto. So they're firstly Boston-based, now they're in Toronto, different currency. So what they do is use a smart form to show the right pricing for their Canadian and US customers. So that way you can see, and you can see under the frequency, you can see the amount listed right there per week. So that way the customers based on their country can see what it's going to cost them. They could also do job role. Let's say Boston Dogwalkers expands it to B2B and decides to target HR professionals in their area because they know HR professionals might be responsible for purchasing some of the benefits that employees get, which would be a really awesome benefit if the company had dog walking services. So as part of that campaign and moving into that B2B role or focus, they are going to update they can update their newsletter. This is the same one that we looked at before. to be more friendly to those HR professionals. And so you can see that a general person receiving the newsletter, the monthly pause, will see 50,000 walks in 50 days. The HR professional who is on their list, in the list membership, will see the benefit your employees and their furry friends love. So again, really powerful and also pretty simple way to optimize that content and really personally speak to people in exactly where they are in their flywheel and their buyer persona. Finally, increasing open rates. Following the last example, this is the optimized subject line for people ops professionals, giving them a tantalizing reason to open the newsletter. All right, and now I hope that gave you some ideas of how perhaps smart content would work for you, your customers, your clients. Let's finish up with looking at how we'd measure success of this program. I think measuring success is something that we want to make sure that we always keep in mind when designing your smart content strategy, to make sure that it's working for you and that you can optimize it as you go. And this will talk a little bit about HubSpot reporting. All right, so the main metrics to care about when we are going through this is, first of all, enriched text modules. Page views is going to be really important, making sure that that the people are actually viewing this, they're looking at it, they're reading it. You can also look at time spent on page, etc. For forms, for personalized forms, you're going to really care about the number of form submissions. For CTAs, you're going to really want to look at the number of clicks and the click-through rates. And hold on one second, there we go. And one other thing I want to note before we go on to the next slide is to make sure to set realistic targets that align with the overall strategy. You should analyze your historical performance data, then use those metrics to calculate your goals and compare your smart content against them to make sure there's no dramatic deviations. So you want to go ahead and look at what your numbers usually are historically and compare the smart content and the general default view content against each other to make sure that your smart content is on the same level and not underperforming your generic content. If you notice that your smart content is underperforming, that's a signal that it's time to rethink the personalization strategy and implement edits that can boost the performance. And so a question I get a lot then is when to check this. I recommend at least one time a month. You don't want to have it running for a long time and have it be unproven. However, you do want to make sure that you check pretty frequently, and want to ensure that you're flexible but long enough to see trends. So daily is probably a little bit too much, depending. And now all of this does depend on volume. If you see a low volume of traffic, clicks and submissions, you may want to wait until you have meaningful volume to see trends. So if it's something that's a bit more specific, let's say you have a really long sales cycle and you have a piece of smart content that is looking at list membership of prospects that are going to be closing a deal, that's an example of something that might take a long time just because the list membership is limited compared to someone that might be a stranger to your content. All right, so quick recap before we open for Q&A. Just to know of what we've learned. We've learned what to do before developing smart content. We've talked about what is smart content. We've gone over the different types of smart content. We've also looked at some examples for inspiration. And finally, we discussed a couple ways to measure smart content. For next steps, and feel free to screenshot this. This will also be sent out. First, you want to review your resources. And make sure you have the right resources for smart content. Then you want to check your buyer persona and flywheel. You want to map that persona to their buyer's journey, to their flywheel. Finally, you want to audit the website and clean your database there before starting the smart content strategy. Then you're ready to outline your smart content strategy. So thinking about which of the 8 characteristics will make the most sense for you, whether text, forms, or CTAs will be the best places for you to use that. Finally, you're going to want to implement. I do recommend implementing a little at a time, so that way you can really measure and have an informed, smart content strategy. All right, with that, I'd just like to say thank you all for listening. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I have my link in there, which will be sent out to you. And we also have some resources at the back of this deck that are linked to different places to talk about smart content, as well as website audits and data cleanup. So with that, Laura, I guess I'll hand it back to you to open up for Q&A.
Wonderful. Yes, if there are questions, please feel free to put them in the chat pane now. We will field them. Kate will see them now, obviously. So please feel free to include them here now.
Thanks, Greg. I'm going to go ahead and go back to what we've learned to see if that'll help kind of reflect on where we might want to start. I know it's a lot of information too, so it might be good to look over all the resources and think about it as well. I'll be including my LinkedIn on the follow-up. So if we don't get a lot of questions and you just need time to soak it all in, always feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kate.
No problem. Thanks, BB.
This is Kelly. I'll just throw one out there in case anybody else is wondering the same thing.
Yeah.
I was just kind of curious if you have any advice on the list membership. I know that can get really complicated, like somebody could be on multiple lists. So do you have any best practices for like how to avoid that and how to make sure that you're like, the right person is getting the right content based on their list?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to organization of your HubSpot instance. So making sure that the team is, and the reason why I say that is because what I see a lot is that, let's say everyone is really excited about the possibility of making lists. Your sales reps are excited, your marketing team is excited, and all of a sudden they're each making tons of lists without naming conventions, and it can be really hard, especially for a marketer that's developing the smart content, to understand which contexts are on what lists. So before even looking, I think, to see the overlap is really understanding what are our processes sound and streamlined for how we're creating lists. Do we have really clear naming conventions so that way it's clear who is going to be on each list when I'm looking for this? So I think it really comes back to the organization. And then what you could do is use some of the HubSpot reporting tools to see like multiple membership and run it through there. But I would really make sure that you have a clean organization. And then when choosing the list to use, make sure that you're using a list that's going to have enough people on it to really warrant using smart content. A list of 3 people is probably not going to be a great example of where you should put in a lot of energy into optimizing your smart content for a button that's going to go to 3 people. So I hope that's somewhat helpful, Kelly. I know the organization piece can be a lot, but I think the HubSpot reporting feature, especially where you can view a table with seeing the different lists that someone's a member of, could be helpful as well.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Thanks. I think the other thing that you said too about making sure that you're only using one rule per smart content instance is really important. Like, depending on the context of the page that you're putting that smart content on, pick one thing and then create the list for that and then name it appropriately, like you said.
Yeah, I think what we recommend is definitely simplicity, especially when you're testing it. So start with one thing, like, can we make sure it's a simple experience for our Canadian customers to go through their buyer's journey with our website, with our newsletter, with our different emails? Like, can we make sure that they're seeing the right currency? Like, that seems simple enough, but actually might take some testing and optimization first before you do things like layering the lifecycle stages or that. And that's just an example. I would pick one to focus on first, streamline it, and then see where you can expand from there.
Great, thank you.
Great question. Frank, happy to see you're inspired. I enjoy even talking about this. It always makes me inspired myself about smart content and the possibility. It is something I think is underutilized in HubSpot sometimes by customers. So definitely good to take a look and see what you can do.
I think the other thing that springs to my mind, Kate, is I think we underutilize it in workflow emails too. You could simplify your nurturing strategy by using smart content in emails. So you have fewer workflows to build because you can customize the body of the email by like job role, for example.
Yeah, and simplifying workflows is always something that's a great idea. I call the ones that like have the tons of branches nightmare Christmas trees. Like they can get really, really big. Sometimes it's warranted. There are complex instances where you need a workflow that looks like that, but I agree that anything you can do to streamline the workflow process and leaning into smart content and personalization to do that is definitely helpful, especially when you're working with a team.
Yeah, those workflow trees can get out of hand fast.
Yeah, I've seen some really incredible ones that are very impressive. I think if there's a reason why you have it, it works, but sometimes they can just get over complex, and making sure that it's as streamlined and simple as possible, so that way there's less errors made. Yeah, and I think for anyone listening as well, just to reiterate, I'm a customer success manager here at HubSpot. If you are a direct customer, you don't work with a specific partner, you probably have a customer success manager. Also, some of our customers that work with partners also have a customer success manager. So I know, like personally, I meet with my customers quarterly. We discuss strategy, and so what we might do ahead of time is I might receive, I'll make an agenda ahead of time and send it out for something for us to discuss. So if you have a CSM at HubSpot, feel free to send them an email ahead of your calls and say, hey, I went to a webinar on smart content. I want to learn more about how we might be able to implement this. And they'll be able to give you some personalized suggestions there and connect you to the right resources. And additionally, if you do work with an agency, our agencies are also great resources for doing this for you in a way that they have a ton of expertise. They see a ton of examples of this day in and day out. So I'm always really impressed with our partners for that too.
I was just going to make that plug, Kate. But no, that's a very good point. Both HubSpot and agency partners will be able to provide support on that. I'm not seeing any more questions filter in over these past few minutes. Kate, thank you for offering to connect with people afterwards and to let them soak in this information and possibly bring things back to you via LinkedIn if need be.
Talking about it, would love to talk about it more. Feel free to connect with me afterwards. And yes, yeah, Greg, a lot of my customers work with partners too, and I always see great results with those customers because they have people that are expertly dedicated to helping them succeed. So as a customer success manager, I personally, and maybe selfishly, love when my customers work with partners as well. But yeah, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm in the Portland, Oregon area. So if you're out here, I'm going to be looking out to join the hug whatever hug's coming up. Yeah, thank you guys for attending. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Kate. All right, as we said, we will be sending out the recording and all of these resources, the deck, everything like that after in a few days toward the end of this week. So keep your eyes open for that. And again, just a plug for our Q4 hug, which will be coming up again, probably mid-November. So we'll be sending more information on that shortly as details are finalized.
Guys.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.